Hello and welcome to Türkiye Talks. As usual, we are going to talk about recent international developments in and around Türkiye. I am joined by Kadir Üstün from Washington and Zuhal Mert from Istanbul. Welcome to the show. If you like, let's start with the grain deal, which was signed in Türkiye by UN, also Ukrainian and Russian delegations. It was an important step for global food security, and recently it was announced that Istanbul will be the center of this grain deal. It was an important agreement during the Ukrainian conflict. Russians and Ukrainians came together. Let's start with this, if you like, Zuhal. How do you see this deal? Do you think it will reshape the regional balances? Do you think it is a sign of a diplomatic move or a ceasefire towards a ceasefire between Russians and Ukrainians? What do you think about this?
Maybe it is important to start by referring that this can be just a kind of support to any kind of ceasefire in the further, let's say, the months. But by itself, this deal cannot be considered as a kind of end of this existing conflict, because, you know, it's a wide range, it has many different dimensions, and this is just the specific ad hoc deal. So we can see a kind of cooperation for the existing, the common problem. But it is not possible to extend it to whole region. And as the most important proof for this argument, as you know, just after this declaration of this agreement, we observed the hitting of the Russian forces around Odessa. So it is considered by some people as a kind of breach of the existing deal, but we observe that it is not considered as a kind of breach or a challenge against the existing deal, especially by the Russian the officials or international lawyers. So we know that this is a very important deal, very important cooperation initiative for the regional peace and order. And when I say this as a region, it must be considered as a wide region. It's not only the Black Sea. We need to underline it. It will cover the Eastern Mediterranean, whole Mediterranean, Africa. So it is really, really important deal. But let's not hope a very big solution as a result of this deal. So it is very important for the balance of the region, and we know that the existing challenges against peace and order is not only the existing war. The result of this war is very critical. So we are talking about this transportation of the grain is very important for the food supply, for the African countries, for the Middle Eastern countries, and we know that existing the flow of immigrants is a problem. So it can provoke more this instability and the problems, humanitarian problems in these regions. So it is very important solution for this existing problem. And we know that it is not only about the transportation of the grain, it is also related with the rising prices, it is also related with rising heat in whole region. So we are expecting a difficult winter. So that's why this deal brought a very serious the support to the balance and the instability in this region. So it must be praised enough. It is very important, and I know that all the diplomatic resources are referring this deal as a very important step under the brokership of Türkiye. So the Turkish presidency, Turkish officials are they spend a lot of energy for that. UN General Secretary underlined that topic, you know, in his very interesting speech by referring Turkish expressions. So we need to praise it. It is very important step for the stability in this region. Maybe not enough to solve all the problems, but let's start from somewhere.
Yeah, it is also regarded as a success or an important step, and even the United States thanked Turkey because for Turkey's efforts. In the meantime, you know, Turkey and the United States has many problems, and most recently, maybe you have noticed, U.S. CENTCOM tweeted about a person who was regarded as terrorist by Türkiye, and there was condolences by the U.S. Army. So we see these conflicting messages from the United States. You are in Washington, Kadir. The United seems to be happy for Turkey's efforts to find a way for this grain deal, but at the same time, the problem about YPG, PKK is still going on. Can you evaluate this for us?
Thank you, Bora. As you know, we discussed U.S. policy on Ukraine war and how the West has been handling it. There's been a lot of pressure on Russia, attempts to isolate Russia, and it cost the West in terms of high energy prices and the food crisis globally. And it's been pushing up inflation everywhere, including the United States. And President Biden said this was a tax by Putin on the world. And he is not wrong about that. However, there have been very few attempts at solutions. And this grain deal is the most concrete solution so far since the start of the Ukraine war, other than Turkey bringing both sides together for an initial ceasefire attempts, but that didn't work out at the end because the sides were not ready for this. But the grain deal is the most significant so far, and that was brokered by Turkey's efforts. So this is a good example of how solutions could be produced. Of course, the United States made an, like you said, they said that they were content with the deal. They were happy about the deal, but we didn't see much more praise than that. It was more like a, you know, relatively neutral statement, to be honest. I think the United States and the West broadly is failing to see some of the strategic benefits of this deal. If you remember, as Zuhal mentioned, a lot of African countries and others, they were some countries are 100% dependent on the grains coming from Ukraine and Russia, and this was giving a huge leverage to Russia. So through this grain deal, it takes away some of that leverage that Russia has. Of course, they can still, you know, they can intensify their military actions in Odessa, and they've given a signal that they are ready to do that. Right after the deal was signed, they bombarded the military installations in Odessa, but the deal hasn't collapsed, and hopefully it won't collapse. So this takes away a major leverage in the hands of Russia. It's, of course, for their national benefit as well. These grains being sold abroad, exported, brings in revenue for them, and it makes them less of a bad guy in the eyes of many countries who are suffering from high inflation and high grain prices. So I think there's been very little discussion in the West, in the Western media, about the significance of this deal. And there's been quite a few reporting on it, but it was skeptical. And of course, people emphasize implementation. It's true. Implementation will be key, as the case with any agreement, right? So I think it is hard to overemphasize the importance of this grain deal, and hopefully the center that was established in Istanbul that will coordinate the exports will be successful in the months ahead, and that should lower the prices for everyone, not just the regional countries, but everyone. There will be less pressure on the prices. And CENTCOM thing you mentioned, if you want to switch gears and move on to that subject, CENTCOM has done this in the past. CENTCOM, there's a structural problem. We talked about this in the past. Turkey, within the American military planning, Turkey belongs to the EU command of the American army, American military. So CENTCOM doesn't have a lot of dealings with Turkey, and whenever they had dealings, they were very negative dealings. And we can start with the Iraq's invasion early on in the early 2000s, the famous Hood incident, and then there have been a lot of tensions on the ground between American forces and Turkish forces, most recently since 2014 about YPG. American army, especially the CENTCOM, sees them as brave soldiers who are fighting against ISIS, and they're training them, supporting them, etc. They're quote-unquote dying next to them, and that's a great asset for American policy. That's how they see it. That's how they've been able to convince presidents like Obama. Of course, Trump was very suspicious of this assessment, and he asked some hard questions like, what are we doing in Syria? But still, CENTCOM managed to remain in the region in the north. They were able to convince Trump, saying that we're holding on to oil, etc. So this history is long. The partnership between YPG and the American military is managed through CENTCOM, which deals with all Middle Eastern affairs. But it doesn't directly deal with Turkey, and this is a structural handicap. And of course, it simply deepens the already existing distrust between the United States and Turkey. And Turkish public opinion obviously does not appreciate this at all. And then when experts turn around and ask about why anti-Americanism is really high in Turkey, we can point to this. Things like this doesn't help at all. So it's not a great state of affairs in terms of U.S.-Turkey relations.
Yeah, and I don't think it will help. Also, once this tweet was published all around Turkey, the U.S. CENTCOM resent it in Turkish, which was very provocative, and I don't think it will help Turkish-U.S. relations.
Can I just add one sentence? Sorry. This is a problem of policy, though, because the military, they have a certain mission. They're given a mission to fight ISIS, and these were supposed to be their partners. This is the policy decision that was made back in Obama's years. So it's hard to blame the military, CENTCOM itself, perhaps, because this is their mission, and their partners are being targeted by Türkiye, which considers them terrorists. But this is an ongoing policy problem that the United States hasn't figured out. They need to have a different policy. They need to stop supporting this group and tell CENTCOM to change their mission, do it in a different way. But this is very hard, as we know.
Yeah, that's clear. I think everybody knows that this policy will stuck at somewhere. It will go to a dead end. But we need someone to who will have the will to change this policy. So we'll see. Since we are all international relations students or experts, I'd like to raise the issue of new security challenges. After we talked about this grain deal, I don't know if you would like to talk about this a little bit. In the past, the wars took place in battlefields. Then we met with the concept of total war. So the war came to the cities. All nations become involved in the wars in the World War I and World War II. Now we see that a conflict between two countries can have impact on global energy security, global food security. As somebody who reads about and writes about international relations, Zuhal, do you think new security challenges will be a bigger problem in the future? You know, when we talk about security, we talk about military issues in general, but now we talk about food, energy, cybersecurity, human suffering, especially when we talk about refugees and other stuff. What is going to happen? What are the new challenges? What this Ukrainian-Russian crisis will tell us about the future?
Yes, you are right. Actually, we were teaching and reading about these new security challenges maybe much before the emerging crisis. I remember in 2000s, the first decade of 2000s, this was a very popular topic. But by the beginning of 2010s, we started to see the real challenges in the field, and they are somehow very closely touching to the Western capitals. So then we started to remember that again, the hot conflicts can emerge, but with the new dimensions, what we discussed before as a new security challenges. So that the global interdependence was a kind of opportunity for the whole world, because we had an opportunity to cooperate and find out some common, let's say, the solutions to the emerging common problems. And the most important common problems were and are still, they are the problems, the health and the health problem, and the immigration, and let's say the environmental problems. And these were somehow so popular in IR literature. But we observe today, after the existing conventional war, there's a kind of combination of an old style and security conception and wars with the new ones. When you were talking about the new security challenges, I remembered automatically the discussion about the cybersecurity attacks much before maybe the existing the Ukrainian crisis, and it was considered somehow very, very serious for the key security, let's say, units inside the state structure. And then we were talking about the immigration, and it is somehow related with health, because you know the protected the zones inside the territorially defined borders of national states. We had some policies, the health policies, so vaccination. So we had somehow a kind of the overcome of the existing health problems, some pandemics of important diseases. But now, after this, the uncontrolled flow of immigrants, we started to face again some pandemics, and the latest pandemic, as we all know, this COVID. So all are somehow interrelated, and of course we are talking about the disinformation as another matter of security today in international relations, because there are so many information, but which one is the correct one? So it can create a serious problem in international relations. We have to refer that to as a new kind of war. This is also very, very important for considering what's happening around us. So the Ukrainian crisis showed us another very important thing, that the war is still the war, and conventional wars are still conventional, and we are still talking about nuclear warfare. Is it possible? Nuclear terror. So it's still very important factor in any kind of warfare in international relations. So today, with the Ukrainian crisis, we follow all these the different aspects of security is in the analysis, must be inside our analysis. But on the other side, as you mentioned, this already existing in that interdependence about food, about the water, about any other human the resources started to be also very, very central. And the existing mechanisms are still very important. When I'm looking at all these developments, I want to underline always that, okay, maybe the existing international organizations and the mechanisms are not perfect. We know that. But on the other side, we don't have any other thing to do something. So the multilateralism and the diplomacy are still very important tool in our hand to overcome these problems. And the most important case, I always refer that, this Turkish position about this grain deal and before about Ukrainian crisis is a very good example. So as a very important strategic country in international relations, Turkey have a know-how to deal with differences. You were talking about the CENTCOM, US, so this region is very well known by Turkish diplomacy and Turkish authorities. And we know how to cope with these, let's say, the challenges. And since the beginning, Turkey tries to keep alive these existing diplomatic lines in order to create a kind of contact. Because diplomacy is not a kind of club where all the friends are coming around the table and enjoying how they are agree on the topics. So diplomacy is related with talking about very difficult topics in between the challenging sides. So Turkey has such an important capacity to do that. And I know that from the many European friends, it is understood and it is somehow considered as very successful, very important. So we have still the very traditional, let's say, the tools to deal with these problems, and we have to use them. We have to keep them as healthy and working. That's why, okay, we have something the new at the table, but we have many things coming from the past, old, but still working, functioning for the peace and stability.
Yeah, as you said, you know, long-standing problems also still there, and one of them is war against terror. Turkey is preparing for an operation in Syria, and also Turkey's problems with Greece still going on, and the US attitude about Greece is not helping. We just remember the 48th anniversary of Turkey's operation in Cyprus in 1974, the peace operation. Let's start with the operation. Kadir, would you like to say something about it? Turkey is preparing for an operation in northern Syria, and Russians are there, Iranians are there, and the president was in Tehran, met with Raisi and Putin, and he will go to Sochi to talk to Russian leader. So probably after this meeting, we can expect a military operation against PKK-YPG. What would you tell us about these developments? Also, if you like to mention the new security challenges.
Well, briefly about the sort of complexity of security challenges, we are seeing that in Ukraine war, in Syria, in Libya, elsewhere, many issues that are emerging threats, emerging challenges are often wrapped with, entangled with traditional security challenges. In the Caucasus, for instance, we've seen the successful use of drones and that's about new emerging technologies, how they can be used in traditional conflict. In the Ukraine war, we just talked about, global food security issues, and Zuhal Hoca mentioned immigration, migration, irregular migration as an effect of traditional wars. So every traditional, let's say, military conflict brings with it complex challenges that touches upon many areas, many policy areas, including food, cybersecurity, environment. So the governments and security agencies have to have much broader perspective, and they have to juggle many more things when they're addressing crises. That's kind of what I can say very broadly about that. But Turkey's operation potential operation, impending operation in Syria, in northern Syria. So the stated goal, the overarching goal, has been consistent. We discussed this before, creating a safe zone area along Turkey's border for about 30 kilometers deep. But the target of the most recent operation that is supposed to happen soon, perhaps in August. We don't know the exact timing, but we saw some tensions around this potential operation in Tehran. Like you mentioned, when President Erdogan visited Tehran, and there was a sort of Astana process, like diplomatic meetings between Russia and Iran and Türkiye, there were clear disagreements about this, and Iran made some strong statements against Türkiye's potential operation. And within a day or two after that, we saw this alleged attack. Well, this attack in Iraq, in northern Iraq, allegedly by Türkiye, but Türkiye denied having anything to do with it, and they're blaming the PKK for provocations. We know that PKK has done these things in the very past, false flag operations and attacks, and then blame it on Türkiye. So we'll probably hear more about that in the coming days. But many sort of analysts saw that as sort of Iran provoking some things inside in Iraq to put pressure on Türkiye and turn the sort of tide against Türkiye's impending operation. And there were some reports also that some pro-Iran Shia militias in Syria, in northern Syria, may be cooperating with Assad forces as well as YPG forces that recently have, come closer to the Assad regime after Türkiye made its plans known about going into northern Syria. So it's a complex picture, and we are seeing sort of alliances between groups that are sort of not happy about what Türkiye announced. And I'm not sure if Türkiye will ultimately give up on this operation. I don't think it will, but I think it also Türkiye doesn't want to come into conflict with Russian forces on the ground, probably, and by making this plan known earlier, it's trying to perhaps clear the way so that resistance is less, or it's only going. It's trying to make the goals of the operation clearer to countries that are on the ground, operating on the ground, like Russia and Iran. So we'll see. We'll see what happens in this operation. But the goals are clear. The timing is the one that we are not clear about. And obviously, there were some Russian bombings in Idlib as well, right after that summit. So both Iran and Russia appear to be telling Türkiye that, it shouldn't do this operation. So we'll see what happens with that. But I have a hard time seeing Türkiye giving up and abandoning this operation, because it doesn't feel safe around certain areas along the Syrian border.
What about, Zuhal, what do you think about Russian attitude? Yesterday, I was talking to a Russian expert who actually implied that the Russian administration will not try to convince Türkiye to stop this operation, or they seem to be willing to accept Türkiye's operation against PKK-YPG. What do you think is the plan for Russians? Do you think they are trying to break the close relationship between YPG and the US by punishing them, or do you think they will try to stop Türkiye? What do you expect from Sochi meeting, and what is your opinion about this probably upcoming operation?
I'm not an expert about this region and especially the Syria, but I can tell about this latest developments, what I see and what kind of developments are probable from the perspective of international conducts. The most probably Russia will not be a kind of the blocker to any kind of the operation, Turkish operation in this region, because we observed this the meetings, the Sochi meeting series, and in this series, the Russia were somehow in probable deals with Turkey. So in the next days, most probably, Turkey would be agree with Russia about some operations in specific regions. Of course, we may see in the field that we may observe somehow some the confrontations, but I don't think that Turkey and Russia will be in a kind of confrontation in Syria in a probable the operation. As you mentioned, Bora, U.S. specific support to the existing the structures in this northern Syria are not so much welcomed by Turkey. So Turkey has some the worries about this the intentions of United States in this region. So of course Russia would not be so sympathetic to help these existing the groups in northern Syria, because Turkey is very important ally for now in this region, especially during the Ukrainian crisis. But on the other side, of course, Russia has several engagement in Syria. So I think it won't be maybe so important support to the existing operation, but the Turkey would be able to make some specific and maybe very strategic operations in Syria.
What about the U.S. attitude? We know that, okay, in the Syrian space, in that field, Turkey is very committed and strong, and operated many times. Turkey did 4 or 5 operations at the border. But on the other hand, on another field, which is the Aegean Sea and Eastern Mediterranean, we see that the United States is empowering Greece to counterbalance or to contain Turkey. Do you think the United States will provoke Turkey more this is your area of expertise, by using Greece and try to, distract Turkey's attention from Syria to this area? What do you think about the U.S. moves in Aegean Sea, and also by making bigger military bases in Greece. Do you think the United States is using Greece as a counterbalance or as a tool to distract Turkey's attention from this area, from Syria?
United States has a regional policy as maybe a global actor, and in this the general frame, Turkey's demands and maneuvers are not so much welcomed many times. We observe this, the reactions from the U.S. officials. Yes, United States today somehow utilize Greece as a kind of tool against Turkish, let's say, the policies. We can follow the chronology of the developments, and we can see how much they are interconnected. We can see that the Syrian operation, a possibility of Turkish army start to raise, and we can see the reactions from the Athens start to come. So this is not only related with the United States. I need to underline that. Also, there is a specific sympathy inside Greece always towards the Kurdish separatist movements in Turkey, because they think that if something happens in the eastern part of Turkey and the Kurdish problem, or maybe when you go back in history, go back to the Arabic uprisings during the Ottoman time, they see that when Turks are somehow busy with these eastern matters, Greece will be benefited from this, let's say, the happenings. This is some kind of equation in their mind. So this kind of strategic perspective makes Greece a very important, let's say, and a ready tool in the hands of U.S. policy. Because for now, we know that U.S. has a kind of sympathy to these structures in northern Syria, and the Greek politicians are trying to give support to the existing structures by referring the Kurdish problem, some problems in Turkish democracy. It's not, of course, they love so much the Turkish people and their democratic demands, but it is related with decreasing the power of the Turkish security concerns in international community, because we know that after NATO summit, Turkey had a kind of success to agree people in the NATO summit. So on the other side, in order to decrease the importance of these worries, you may refer some other nice words, somehow common and have somehow a common respect in international community. So from that aspect, we can say that the Greece has somehow a connection with what's happening in Syria to create a kind of the tension in Aegean Sea can be evaluated, connected with Syria. It's not only Syria. We can see also the follow of the Greek diplomacy, Greek foreign ministry of Turkish diplomacy. When you look at their visits, diplomatic visits, they are just following one step behind the Turkish diplomacy. When there is a meeting in between Saudi Arabia and Turkey, you can see in a few weeks the Greek diplomats, the foreign ministry is in Saudi Arabia. So this is somehow related with the worry of balancing Turkish power in the region. So it's very possible to evaluate that United States and Greece cooperation will be against any kind of operation in Syria. But on the other side, we must underline that there is NATO, and inside NATO there must be at least a picture of a united alliance appearance. So I won't expect, I don't want to expect, maybe this is the right expression, any kind of hot conflict in Eastern Mediterranean or Aegean Sea. And if something happens, it will not distract Turkey's operation. I think it is not so I don't know, a big threat to Turkish power calculations.
Yeah. Okay. Before closing, Kadir, I'd like to ask you a similar question. The U.S. policy is not helping Turkish Greek relations, and recently both the president underlined the fact that he's not happy with the Greek attitude, and also Turkey's president of communications, Professor Fahrettin Altun, also spoke to the Greek media. He also criticized, and he said the Prime Minister Mitsotakis's credibility is not strong in Turkey. Do you think this U.S. policy will divide both countries more, or at some point they will realize that these are two NATO countries and it's not a good idea to put these two countries against each other?
Bora, we discussed this issue before. As you remember, the U.S. policy was for a long time keeping some sort of balance between, Turkey and Greece in terms of military sales, diplomatic gestures, etc. For many people, especially observers in Turkey, they're thinking that this balance is being disturbed by the American administration, and this is not healthy for the unity, cohesion within NATO, and it's encouraging Greece to try to, push back against Turkey, isolate Turkey, or encircle it somehow. And these are, of course, two neighbors that are really close. Like physically, those islands are literally just kilometers away from Turkish coast, and Turkey does not actually have this kind of border issues with other neighbors. So this is not an issue that can be resolved or that could be dictated from outside, from the West, from Europeans, from the United States. And Greece, I'm just hoping that they're going to come to their senses and need to launch a serious dialogue process with Turkey. That's the only way. Otherwise, these efforts, these trying to make Turkey the bad guy and pushing back against it and advocate for downgrading of U.S. relations with Turkey in Washington. That's what Mitsotakis did, basically. Those are not helpful actions. Those are not diplomatically and strategically wise decisions. Here you have a country, Turkey, that is playing a critical role in perhaps the most important conflict right now in Europe. So how do you, if you're the Greek government, how are you really going to make Turkey less influential or less powerful? This is a fact of life you need to live with, and you need to actually find. For a while, it was working. Turkey and Greece had coordination mechanisms. They were, dealing with issues on the ground. But lately, that hasn't been the case. I just hope that it changes soon, because that's pretty much the only way. There's no other way for these two closely connected neighbors.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. That's it for this week. Thank you, Zuhal. Thank you, Kadir. Hope to see you next time.